It is 5 p.m. here in Oxford, Mississippi. My name is George Giro. I am coming to you live for Just G Live. And as there's no one here just yet in the live stream, oh, now there's someone. Good afternoon. Good afternoon to our so far just single viewer. I am just getting some prep work finished up. So give me just a second. And we will start getting into the show. Just a second. I need to make sure I have everything pulled up and ready to go so I can give you guys a good show. Hey, Dylan. Actually, no, you know what? Let's just put this in the side here. Get that out of here. Let's finish this up. Dylan, I don't know if you're on Discord right now, but we could throw this up in the chat, see if anybody there wants to tune in. I think it was Michael yesterday who was talking and saying that that's something he might be interested in. Hey, perfect. Beautiful. Even better. So, did I pass it? I did. Okay. Got all my notes set up, and first off, I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in. This is going to be the last show that we're talking about the AFC. I still have a whole nother conference of football to talk about. This is going to be about the AFC West, which, if you think about it, this very well could have been the most successful division in football last year, just because the Chiefs won the Super Bowl. When it comes to the regular season, they weren't necessarily the best. You had the Chiefs leading the way. They were 12-4. Broncos and Raiders tied in record. The Broncos had the tiebreaker over the now Las Vegas Raiders. Both those came in at 7-9 in the regular season, and the Chargers coming up last in the division, 5-11 last season. Each of these teams, apart from the Chiefs, have made some pretty sizable moves. So this upcoming season for them will be pretty interesting. The Chiefs, I think, looked at their success of last season. You know, they rode their offense. They rode the fact that Patrick Mahomes, at this point, I would venture to say, is probably the most talented quarterback in the NFL, if not just straight up the best. He was incredible all of last season. And there really isn't any other way to put it. He was incredible from the start of the season to the end of the season. You know, the season before, I see you guys in the chat. The season before, he came out and just won the MVP. Just wasn't anything to him. He made it almost look easy, and then he continues to impress in his next season, going on to win a Super Bowl and the Super Bowl MVP. So let's see if I can make this a little bit bigger. So we do have a couple of people tuning in right now. So normally I would take a couple minutes and maybe see if we could wait on some other people to tune in, but we've already got a nice crowd going right now. So we're going to move right along and talk about those Kansas City Chiefs and what they've done so far in this offseason to maybe make it back to that same Super Bowl winning level. Now, for additions, they haven't made many major additions. And again, just to make sure that everybody knows, these additions are just kind of, they're not all of them. They're kind of just the top tier as outlined in an article by NFL.com, kind of going with their standard. They know what's going on. I mean, they're the league. So for the additions, they are franchise tagging their defensive lineman, Chris Jones. He was injured most of last season, but when he came in during the playoffs, he was just a force to be reckoned with. He really added another level to that defense that might not have been performing to a super high level prior to. And, you know, with defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo, he really needs a strong pass rush for that defense to succeed. And you saw that defense come up big when they needed to, especially in the Super Bowl game against the 49ers. Also bringing in Antonio Hamilton at corner, signing a one-year deal. Chad Henne, he's just a backup quarterback with a guy like Patrick Mahomes at quarterback. You really hope not to have to rely on your backup, and with someone who's been as good and as durable as Mahomes has been so far in his NFL career, You really don't think he'll be getting much playing time, but he certainly is a solid backup option, someone that'll, hold down the fort if need be. You've got Demarcus Robinson re-signing with the team. He was already on the team last year, a depth wide receiver, someone who might not get all the touches of the ball, might not make all the catches, but he's certainly useful when he gets the ball in his hands. And last but not least, the other major acquisition, if you will, for the Chiefs, their running back Damian Williams. They just picked up a 1-year option on him. He's coming back to the team. He was part of that offense's, high level success that they had last season. So we'll be able to see if, more of a full calendar year of having this offense put together will be beneficial for the Chiefs. You have to think it will be. With all that in mind, it is interesting that the Chiefs decided not to go out and get some of these other depth players that you would think that they need, especially when it comes to players on the offensive line and some players on defense. When you look at the people that they've lost so far this offseason, quarterback Matt Moore was backing up as well. You didn't expect him to get signed, especially with Chad Henn coming back. Running backs LaShawn McCoy and Spencer Ware, with Damian Williams coming back again, those are guys that are really easily replaced, especially when it comes to production. And going towards the offensive line, this is also where it gets a little bit interesting that the Chiefs didn't make any moves. They lose two of their guards. Stefan Wisniewski went over to Pittsburgh, and Cameron Irving just hasn't signed anywhere yet. Both of those two players, have been kind of mainstays on that offensive line throughout the season last year, and not having an immediate replacement for them, even if it is someone who's primarily been a second string, like someone that the Jets picked up, Greg Van Roten, or one of these other players. I think Detroit picked up an offensive lineman. Not going out and really making a push for one of those players could come to bite the Chiefs going out and getting one of those offensive linemen in the draft. Some of the other losses for the Chiefs, all the rest of these are on defense. And again, this is where I think the Chiefs also could have tried to make more of a move. They're losing defensive end Emmanuel Ogbah. He's going out to Miami. I mean, I can't blame him really, going from Kansas City to Miami. I mean, just looking at the city, I don't blame him at all. Might not be as successful down there. They're also losing out on linebackers Darren Lee and Reggie Ragland. Darren Lee has not signed anywhere, the former first-round pick. And then Reggie Ragland has signed with the Detroit Lions. And losing out on Bashad Breeland, Morris Claiborne, and Kendall Fuller, all of which are corners, which it's weird that they're letting so many of one position go and not have really the same amount of replacement level players coming in. Kendall Fuller went to the Redskins, Morris Claiborne and Breeland. Neither of those two have gone anywhere else or have been signed by another team. The Chiefs did bring in Antonio Hamilton, but that's only one corner. They need at least two more. I think this coaching staff and this front office is just looking at the success of last year and kind of thought, well, we didn't win on the back of our defense. It's okay if our defense isn't necessarily as good as last season or even at that same level. They're looking at it and saying, our offense is going to lead the way. Our offense is going to put up probably at least 30 points a game. I wouldn't put it past them. And as long as they can work with a good scheme and get to the other team's quarterback, that's really all they'll need to do to continue this high level of success. I mean, like I said, they re-signed Damian Williams. They've already got the quarterback, Patrick Mahomes. Travis Kelce is probably one of, if not the best tight end in football right now. And then they just have some of the best receivers in football as well. I can't blame them for not necessarily going out and making a big splash move, especially when a lot of these players that they would be signing, you can get for not any money if you just draft them and sign them to their rookie contract. That isn't something that would be, priority number one for the Chiefs. Moving on from the Chiefs, like I said, like we do every week, every stream, we're going to take this down from the standings last season, and at the end of the stream, we'll be kind of taking a look and seeing where we might put these teams next season. So, moving on from the Chiefs, we have the Denver Broncos. Now, the Broncos find themselves in an interesting position. Throughout the beginning of last year, they were kind of relying on a veteran quarterback in Joe Flacco. Flacco is no longer with the team. He was released. And midway through or late into the season, they went on to what they think is their rookie quarterback, their quarterback of the future. And it was interesting because Flacco just had, almost no success. And it was Drew Lock. Just had to make sure that one I didn't want to get that one wrong. Drew Lock came in and played to a very high level. If not for someone like Lock coming in, I know Brandon Allen was their other quarterback. Allen would have been a non-factor. Joe Flacco was honestly being somewhat of a detriment to the team. He was throwing interceptions. He wasn't accurate with the football. He just wasn't playing well. And as soon as they move on from Flacco and go to Lock, the team immediately gets better. Everyone else around Lock started playing better. And for them, that was kind of the sign that he is their guy going forward. So they did a little bit to work around Lock. They added to their defense greatly, I think. They added a couple really good pieces on the defensive side of the ball, and they also added a couple other weapons up front for him. So the Broncos went on to add this offseason AJ Bouye, a corner. He was acquired for a fourth-round draft pick from Jacksonville. That was just another part of the Jacksonville Jaguars, taking that defense and kind of tearing it apart and kind of spreading the pieces around the rest of the NFL. Interestingly enough, another one of the major acquisitions for the Broncos came via trade. Trades aren't necessarily something you see a lot of in football. A lot of the moves are either from the draft or from free agency. The Broncos traded for Jarrell Casey, defensive lineman from the Tennessee Titans, and he was acquired for just a 7th-round pick. That's another one that you're putting up a little bit of a flyer out because these other teams, you don't know what you're going to get out of a draft pick. But at the same time, those future picks, even a 4th-round pick or a late-round pick, can turn into something great for your team. So it's kind of turning an unknown variable into a known quantity. And when you can get people as quality as AJ Bouye and Jarrell Casey for pretty much players you don't know what you're getting out of, I think both of those moves are very, very good for the Broncos. They're really, I don't think any better ones that they could have made. Other moves that they made, Shelby Harris, defensive lineman as well, coming back to the Broncos. He was on the team last year. Graham Glasgow signed a 4-year, $44 million deal. That's an offensive lineman, an interior offensive lineman, I should add. He will probably do a great job protecting the young quarterback. Melvin Gordon coming over from the Los Angeles Chargers. God, that's still so weird for me to say. I don't like it. They're always gonna kind of be the San Diego Chargers to me, but now they're going to be playing in Los Angeles, and they're currently playing in Carson at a soccer stadium. The Broncos are not bringing back. They're bringing in a new punter, Sam Martin, coming in on a 3-year contract, and a new tight end, Nick Vannett. Martin he's just a good punter, a solid punter. Just every team needs a good punter. They really are. I think punters and kickers are some of the most underrated and undervalued positions on the field. I mean, you've seen I'm sure everybody's seen a bad punt. If someone kind of just dribbles it 15 yards, that really doesn't help your defense at all. And at the same time, a good kicker, if you can't hit a field goal, you're essentially just giving the ball back to the other team and putting no points up on the board. And now that they've backed up, the extra point line after touchdowns, these aren't chip shots anymore. These are kicks that plenty of kickers are missing. So bringing in someone like Sam Martin could end up being a very good addition for the Broncos. Melvin Gordon coming in, it's an interesting move, especially when you think of the fact that the last couple of years he hasn't necessarily been productive for the Chargers. And he's luckily, though, for the Broncos, he's only coming in on a 2-year contract. It's 2 years, 16 million. The weird part for that one is 13 and a half of that million, or 13 and a half of that 16 million is guaranteed for Gordon. Now to the losses for the Broncos, and there are some losses in here that are not easily replaced. At this point, backup quarterbacks Brandon Allen and Joe Flacco are no longer with the team. Guard Ronald Leary is no longer with the Broncos. I mean, Graham Glasgow, I think, is an upgrade for that position, not just a lateral move. I genuinely believe Glasgow is an upgrade in that position. Center Connor McGovern went to the New York Jets. Center is one of those positions that if you get a good center, you should be inclined to hold on to that player for as long as possible. And even though McGovern might not have been the starting center with the Broncos, offensive linemen get hurt pretty frequently, and to have somebody as durable as McGovern on the team is very helpful, especially in a depth role. Now to the defensive losses for this Broncos team. You've got Derek Wolfe going to the Ravens, Chris Harris Jr., corner going to the Chargers. Cyrus Jones has not been signed anywhere, and safety Will Parks went across the country to Philadelphia. This team over the last couple years has been one that has relied on its defense, kind of anchored by Von Miller, still arguably one of the best edge rushers and linebackers in the game today. But the way that this is looking, this Broncos team, I think, is improving greatly this offseason, mostly on the back of some of these trades. Bringing in Bouye adds, a lockdown corner to this defense. Jarrell Casey adds another level to the pass rush from the interior that they just didn't have last year. And pairing him up with Shelby Harris just makes it that much better. It really adds another dimension to that defense that they might not have had last year. And at the same time, they're bringing in players to support their new young quarterback, Drew Lock. They're bringing in players in support of him that should really bolster that offense. I don't see a whole lot coming out of Nick Vannett. He has kind of just been a replacement level player over the years. That said, Melvin Gordon, if he can have a return to form from the last couple of years, that is, if this long hiatus from football can hopefully repair those knees and those ankles, he could be a good addition to this team. But the lack of adding a new wide receiver for Locke, a new target, is one that's kind of curious to me, one that doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense. I guess the Broncos are looking towards the draft for this. At the same time, I don't necessarily think they have a good enough draft pick to get one of the elite wide receivers in this draft. I don't think they're in a position to get a CeeDee Lamb or a Jerry Jeudy or a Henry Ruggs. This team, I think, will get better, and I think they will kind of shift back to a team that focuses on their defense. With that in mind, I'm not sure that they will be able to overtake the Chiefs for the division. For next season, I'm going to keep them kind of at a 7-9, 8-8 level. I do think they get better, maybe even up to a 9-7, getting over 500. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they will be challenging for the division. This team. Okay. Moving on to the new Las Vegas Raiders. And if you haven't seen the pictures of this Raiders new stadium, I highly recommend it. It's pretty much, it looks just like it almost looks like a hockey puck kind of slapped in the middle of the Vegas Strip. And it's incredible to see, even not fully constructed, because you see all these neon signs, all the bright lights of Vegas, and then this giant black spot in the middle of the Vegas Strip. It's really interesting. And I mean, I guess that kind of does harken back to Oakland and the black hole of the old Oakland Raiders. but they have made more than a couple. They've made a lot of additions to this team, and it will be interesting to see how some of them pan out. Some of them I'm not convinced by. Some of them I think will certainly be good additions for this team. So the new Las Vegas Raiders have brought in Nelson Aguilar from the Philadelphia Eagles. He signs a 1-year veteran benefit contract. Very, very inexpensive, just over $1 million and less than $1 million guaranteed. He's, one of those receivers that has been roasted. Realistically, he's been roasted online for having no hands. He's been very prone to dropping the football. He's not been the most reliable receiver either when it comes to injuries the last couple of years with Philadelphia. Raiders also bring in corner Eli Apple, and if you listened or watched to the last stream, I had a little conversation with my friend Bailey in the chat about how not very good Eli Apple has been his entire NFL career, either being with the Giants or the New Orleans Saints. He's been kind of a walking defensive pass interference. Anytime he's in just a kind of cover situation, you can always expect something to go wrong. Malik Collins coming in is a defensive lineman coming in on a 1-year deal. Safety Jeff Heath signing a 2-year deal. Lineman Eric Kush coming in on a 1-year deal. If you could see, there's a lot of turnover with this team. Nick Kwiatkowski coming in on a 3-year contract with $13.5 million guaranteed. Corey Littleton, 3-year deal worth up to $36 million. I think both of those moves are very good for this Raiders team, especially one that has been very thin at the linebacker position ever since moving on from Khalil Mack. Marcus Mariota, the former Tennessee Titans quarterback, is coming in to either back up or possibly provide a challenge in a quarterback duel to be the next starting quarterback of the Raiders. He's coming in on just a 2-year fully guaranteed, 2-year $17.6 million contract. Only the first year is fully guaranteed, and that first year's base salary is $7.5 million. So it's $17.6 million over 2 years, and at least $7.5 million guaranteed. They've also brought in defensive end Carl Nassib, another 3-year contract with $17 million guaranteed. And then longtime Cowboys tight end Jason Witten going to play for John Gruden in the Raiders on a 1-year, $4 million contract with $3.5 million guaranteed. To me, that is probably one of the more interesting moves of the entire offseason, and not necessarily for the quality of the player. And while Jason Witten is a quality tight end, it's interesting to see him. It'll be interesting to see him play in something other than white and blue with a star on the front of his jersey. And it will be kind of weird to see him in Raiders black and silver. Now, like I said, there was a lot of turnover with this team. So in with all those additions, there have to be losses to go with them. So it's a bit of a shorter list, but the losses are, pretty big for this team. They're losing backup quarterback Mike Glennon, and obviously he's immediately replaced by Mariota. I think Mariota, no matter how much of a bust he's been over the first contract of his career, he was going to be touted as the next big Titans quarterback, and that really hasn't panned out. I do think he is an immediate upgrade for Glennon if Derek Carr were to get hurt. Wide receiver Dwayne Harris, again, he's one of those wide receivers that's been, quote, replacement level. He hasn't necessarily been the best for the Raiders through this part of his career. So bringing in Nelson Aguilar on such a cheap contract, Aguilar is essentially at this point a boom or bust. You expect either absolutely no production or have him come in and produce at a decent level. They lost 2 linebackers, Vontaze Burfict, who I'll get to Burfict in a little bit, and Tahir Whitehead, who is a very, very good linebacker, went over to Carolina. Corners Daryl Worley and safety Carl Joseph, and Joseph went to the Cleveland Browns. Now, Losing out on someone like Vontez Burfict, I don't necessarily think is such a big deal for this Raiders team. Sure, in a way, he kind of embodies the old school Raiders. He's extremely physical, very much in your face, but at the same time, they're in a way, Burfict, as much as he's on the field, he's off the field. And it's not as though he's off the field for things like injuries. He's off the field for intentionally giving other players concussions. And while it might not be intentional, the amount of times he's been suspended, been suspended, I think, at least 4 games for the last 4 years of NFL football. A track record like that shows that he kind of has a disrespect for other players' safety, disrespect for his own safety, a disrespect for his teammates, because realistically, if you're willing to do something like that and risk yourself not playing, that has to show that you don't care enough for your teammates to try and stay on the field and produce for your team. And realistically, having him not on the field, he has not been picked up by another team. Having him not on the field for any team, I think, may be a good thing for the NFL. He has been reinstated after a year-long suspension, but he really has been dangerous for the other players of the NFL. And the fact that he's not on a team right now, I think, is a good thing. Now, with all of these additions to this team, especially the ones kind of in the middle third of their defensive line, they picked up Carl Nassib and Malik Collins. Yes, those two will be impacts. They will be difference makers for this team, but really shoring up that linebacking core and those corners, which the corners are typically put in with the secondary and the safeties, but for the time being, I will kind of just put them in with the defensive players that the Raiders have really improved upon. Eli Apple coming in, I mean, the team lost out on Daryl Worley. He's no longer with the team. Bringing in Eli Apple to replace him, I'm unconvinced. He hasn't shown me anything throughout his short career so far that he should be a starting corner in the NFL. Bringing in Jeff Heath, Kwiatkowski, and Littleton, I think, has been great for this team. It's a team that had a strong offense last year on the back of Derek Carr and rookie running back. They also have a young wide receiver who's been playing very well last season. So I don't think their offense is going to take a step back, especially bringing in Jason Witten, who over his career with the Cowboys has been something of a safety blanket. He's kind of that guy that if you throw it to him, kind of anywhere near him, either he'll make sure that he catches the ball or he makes sure that he doesn't cause some sort of interception. That's been kind of his MO for his entire career thus far. And I think he'll be a great asset for Derek Carr and a John Gruden style offense that has been focused on the offense up until this point with Oakland. There's just one more team in the division. If you're still here in the chat, thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate everybody coming in. Let me know if you guys have any questions or any talking points you want me to get to. Throw it up in the chat. I have it pulled up, and I'll be keeping an eye on it while we get to this last division, or this last team, excuse me. So the last team in the AFC West to get to is, as I said, the formerly San Diego Chargers, now Los Angeles Chargers. This is a team that a lot of the moves that they've made have been, I think, interesting is the best way to put it. I'm not sure if this team is going to get a lot better or if they're going to be very much the same as they were last season. Now, last season they went 5-11. A lot of the players that have been difference makers for this team are no longer with the team. Let's quickly run through the additions for this team. The Chargers brought in offensive tackle Brian Bulaga from the Packers. He signs a 3-year, $30 million contract. running back Austin Eckler agrees to a new 4-year, $24.5 million contract with $15 million guaranteed. He is staying with the team. That's a re-sign, not necessarily a true free agent signing. Cornerback Chris Harris is coming in on a 2-year, $17 million contract. He's coming over from Denver, staying in the division, but just shifting teams. Hunter Henry got the franchise tag placed on him, tight end. He's been injured for the majority of the first part of his career, but I think the Chargers still see his talent, and so do I. Linval Joseph, a defensive lineman, coming in on another 2-year, $17 million deal, and Trey Turner, an offensive lineman as well, was acquired in a trade with the Carolina Panthers. And we'll get into the player that they gave up for Trey Turner when we get to some of the losses. Now, a lot of these moves, looking at some of the losses for this team, realistically are kind of lateral in that they're taking a position or a player that they had last season and kind of just taking one out and plugging a new player in. Now, this team will have to ride on their quarterback. That's kind of just how the offense has gone. And with that in mind, I find it important to get into the losses for this team and kind of their situation. So this team used to have one of the elder statesmen of the NFL, and that being Phillip Rivers. If you remember I think it was the 2000 draft, sometime around then, 2000, 2001, I think it was. It was, the big players, big quarterbacks to be drafted were Eli Manning, Phillip Rivers, that kind of class. Even Ben Roethlisberger going later in that draft. Now, the Giants ended up with Eli Manning, trading Eli Manning plus pretty much a lot of the futures that they had for Eli. They traded Phillip Rivers, that is, for Eli and a lot of futures. Phillip Rivers ended up with the Chargers, and after a long career in San Diego and California, he has decided to move on from the team. The team decided to move on from him, and they haven't found a replacement. Now, they do have their still backup. They still have their backup, I should say, from last season, that being Tyrod Taylor. And if you remember, Tyrod Taylor coming over from the Bills, not last season, but the season before that, in his time with Buffalo, he led them to a playoff berth, I think once, not getting past the wild card round. But I'm unsure of him as a starting NFL quarterback. And with the amount of quarterback talent that was available this offseason, I find it interesting that the Chargers decided, we're going to stick with Tyrod, and the fact that there's still talent out there. Cam Newton is still a free agent. I'm sure Andy Dalton is still available via trade with the Bengals. But as far as I know, the Chargers have essentially said, look, we're going to stick with Tyrod. We're going to stick with the guy that at this point should know the system, seeing as he's been here long enough. Now, last season, the running back situation was pretty much a toss-up between Austin Eckler and Melvin Gordon. Obviously, after the performances from last year and even the year or two prior, the Chargers have decided to stick with Austin Eckler and move on from Gordon. It says Gordon back to the Chargers. No, Gordon went to the Broncos to possibly be their starting running back. Austin Eckler staying in California. The other losses so far for this team, fullback Derek Watt going to the Pittsburgh Steelers, teaming up with his brother TJ. Wide receiver Travis Benjamin going to the 49ers. Offensive guard Michael Schofield is not on another team as of now, but he is no longer with the Chargers. Offensive tackle Russell Okung, he is the player that they traded for Trey Turner. Now, that's one that I find interesting because I think both of those players are at a similar skill level. They're both solid offensive linemen. The difference is position. Russell Okung is a tackle, whereas Trey Turner is an offensive guard. He's an interior lineman. It's one that because this team brought in Brian Balaga, I don't think it'll hurt the team, because I feel as though, a left tackle or offensive tackles are, I'd say, more valuable than guards. That's just the nature of today's game, especially in the pass rush / pass defense excuse me, side of the game. A tackle will have more of an impact on the passing game than the running game. Now, maybe that shows a marked change in the Chargers strategy going forward, maybe with the fact that they're losing a very throw the ball heavy quarterback, a gunslinger of sorts in Phillip Rivers, going to someone who's more mobile and better on the ground. They feel more comfortable taking a guard or taking a tackle, I should say, and acquiring a solid guard. The only thing that concerns me with the idea of that is moving on from Melvin Gordon and shifting to Austin Eckler. Now, they're both really good running backs. They're both extremely good between the tackles, between the hash marks. That said, Austin Eckler is smaller. He isn't as, I wouldn't say, well, at this point, at the beginning of their career, both in their prime, Eckler was less durable. At this point, Gordon is much less durable just based on his career injury history. But for the most part, Eckler's been used as a running back that should be split out wide or should run a route after blocking before as just a between the tackles runner. And moving on from a tackle and bringing in a guard kind of tells me that this team is going to start running the ball a little bit more and running the ball a little bit more aggressively. There are a couple other losses. There's some losses for this team on the defensive side of the ball. Brandon Mebane, a defensive lineman, is out. 2 linebackers, Jatavis Brown going to the Philadelphia Eagles and Thomas Davis going to Washington. And then 2 safeties, Adrian Phillips going up to New England to play for the Patriots, and safety Jalen Watkins going to Houston to play for the Texans. And again, those losses have been unmitigated. The only player that they've brought in has been cornerback Chris Harris and Linval Joseph. So that's pretty much taking one defensive lineman and turning it into, one other defensive lineman, losing 2 linebackers and bringing in nobody to replace them, losing 2 safeties and bringing back in 1 secondary player. I think the Chargers are going to have to be very busy at the draft to make sure that they field a competitive team that is, unless they're focusing on finding their quarterback of the future, not this year, but the next year. Now, I'm not going to say the word, but the Chargers very well could be in a position to draft toward the top of the draft next year. Not this coming month, but the next. With that said, looking at these moves, I don't think this Chargers team has done much to improve themselves, especially at the quarterback position. Now, even though Phillip Rivers wasn't good last year, Indianapolis said, okay, we'll bring you in. We'll see how you play against someone like our other quarterback, Jacoby Brissett. I don't think Phillip Rivers was good. With that in mind, I don't think Tyrod Taylor is a very good quarterback either. He's more mobile. He might have a stronger arm at this point in his career, but he's also been prone to kind of tucking the ball and running when he had options down the field, losing out on yardage. He's been inaccurate, and he obviously wasn't wanted in Buffalo after he brought them to a playoffs for a reason. There has to be something else maybe that I don't see or that we're not seeing about either his person or just how other people evaluate his play, because I haven't heard anything bad about him. I'm sure he's a great guy, great in the locker room. I won't say anything else about that, but just based on what I see from him on the field, I don't think he's a starting quarterback in today's NFL, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Chargers decide to try and go out and get another player, either to challenge him for the starting role or to be their starter this season anyway. And kind of with all those moves in mind, I think it's now time to re-rank this division. And with all the other divisions, I think there has been kind of a major shift in at least one or two of these spots. But looking at it, I don't see there being that in the AFC West. I think the Chiefs are going to maybe not build on their Super Bowl success, but I certainly don't think that they're going to get any worse. I don't think they'll get much worse, I should say. Some of their moves have been kind of head scratchers, but I don't think they're going to get so significantly worse that they aren't challenging for this division, if not just blowing every other team out of the water for it. Now, looking at the moves made by the Broncos and the Raiders, I think both of those teams are going to need to work at the draft and work very hard at the draft. They're going to need to draft well, and they're going to need to maybe even make some moves at the draft with everybody gathered together to really improve for this next season. Both teams, well, all three of the rest of the teams really have some level of a question mark at their quarterback position. Drew Lock, very young quarterback. Yes, he had a year behind Flacco, or at least a part of a year behind Flacco, but he did perform well at the end of last season. I'm not going to take his word on it of just a portion of a season that, yes, he was very good in that time, but I do still think he's unproven. After last season, I've always thought Derek Carr for the Raiders has been a good quarterback, a very good quarterback, actually, and well worth the money that he's being paid. But their coach, John Gruden, has always kind of been, seemingly unsure of the quarterback. And with them bringing in Marcus Mariota, who this very well could have lit a fire under him, he very well could come out and win the starting quarterback spot in preseason or in training camp. And as for the Chargers, I think I've already said my piece on them sticking with Tyrod Taylor at their quarterback position. So I think all three of those teams are going to need to do a lot at the draft to bolster their rosters before they can even think of overtaking the Chiefs for for supremacy of the AFC West. Now, so with that in mind, we are going to stick the rankings as so. We're going to go Chiefs at number 1, keep them there. Broncos. We're going to go Broncos at 2 again, Raiders at 3 again. Both of them, I think, get better. I think we see the Broncos maybe 10-6, 9-7, Raiders 9-7, 8-8. And the Chargers, I'm not confident in the Chargers. I don't think the Chargers are going to be that good. I think they regress. I think they get worse. I think they have a tough schedule, especially in what's becoming one of the tougher divisions in all of football. I think they regress. I think they go from 5 wins to maybe 3 or 4. I don't see much going on there. But I think that is all I have for you guys today. If you guys, like I said, if you guys have anything for me, throw it up in the live chat. I will be, I'll stick around for a couple minutes, answer any questions, have any more chat with you guys. I really appreciate everybody tuning in. This has been the last episode talking about the AFC. We will shift on Friday to the NFC, and let me check my notes one more time just to see which NFC team we're going to start with. I think I have an idea of which one we're going to go with. Let's see here. Okay. Yep. I've already got it all put together. So to start off the NFC, we will be starting with, I kind of did this for my friend Bailey. He was watching last stream for the most part, being pretty active in the chat, and I really appreciated that. So on Friday, we will be starting off the NFC with the NFC South. For a lot of people in this area, they're either fans of the Saints or fans of the Falcons, maybe even fans of the Panthers, just because they're all pretty local. But until next time, if you guys don't have anything else for me, I've been George Ruggiero. I really appreciate everybody tuning in, and I will see you back here Friday afternoon, 5 p.m., and we will be taking on the first division of the NFC South.